Okay, yes, it's recording. Hi everyone, I'm Tina Carter and I run Airhedz aerial training in Whitstable in Kent. I've been asked to share how I've been teaching outside. So I've put a presentation together which I'll share with you in a second. I just thought, because I won't be able to see the Zoom chat, if you've got questions, or hopefully we'll just be able to have a conversation afterwards. So if you put things in the chat and then we'll pick them up afterwards. Is that okay? Excellent. All right, I will, if I can find a way to share the screen. Share the screen. This one. There we go. Can everybody see that? Oh, I can't see you anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Hey. Okay. Here we go. So yes, I've been teaching outside on my aerial rig in the garden for just over a month now. So I'm just going to talk through how I got started and then the whole process that I've undergone. Before actually doing it, I decided probably the best thing to do is to survey my students to see if it was actually of interest. Thankfully it was. I had to wait until we had the government go ahead, until it was legal, and I had to actually wait until we could actually have people visiting the gardens rather than just training outside. During all of that time I did constant, and I'm still doing constant research into COVID-19, into safe working practices across different sectors. So looking at the circus sector, pole dance studio sectors, outdoor work, performing, theatre, all sorts, trying to get my head around some of that. I then spoke to both insurers, my business insurers, who were really happy to go ahead, and then obviously I had to speak to my home insurers to make sure that it didn't counter any of the conditions that I've got on there. Quite an extensive risk assessment was undertaken, quite an extensive waiver was written, and then once I'd written both of those with help with links that I'll share with you, I then sent the whole lot to Equity, to the legal team, and asked them to cast their eyes over it. They came back and said, yeah, this is all good to go. Clearly, I had to have a conversation with my partner because I live with him and it's a shared space. So we wanted to make sure that we were really happy to get things up and going, and then do a pros and cons. Is it really worth doing this? So I sent the students information first of all. I said, who's this for? I started working with adults, not children, not youth, because I wanted to test out my systems first of all, knowing that I could have quite coherent conversations with some adults where they could take responsibility for themselves before I then started going in with the younger people. I've set all classes at half an hour if they're one-to-one, or an hour for one to household. The content of the sessions is really quite basic to start off with, because most of the people I'm working with haven't done any aerial for at least 4 months. So I've taken it right back to the start. I'm happy to talk about price and payment, but I was really trying to find a way of negotiating what is appropriate for and affordable for them, but which doesn't really penalise me either. Timetabling, I've chosen to do Monday, Wednesday and Friday so that I have a day in between to deal with any issues if they come up, but also to ensure that I've got a really thorough cleaning process in place. And all the booking and payments are done online. So the initial protocols, the first line is really kind of basic. It's adherence to COVID-19 protocols, but because they are constantly changing, that too is constantly changing. They had to read the risk assessment, which is 10 pages long, and the waiver they have to sign, and they sign that on a daily basis. I have hand sanitizer, clean clothes, face coverings if they have can wear them if possible. They have to bring their own rosin, chalk, water. If they're coming with a partner or with a parent, I've asked them to bring their own chairs, and we're now looking at them bringing their own equipment. really strict entry and exit time so that I don't have people passing in my through my narrow gateway. I've instructed that there's no use of my toilet, but obviously if there are emergencies, then I'll do a thorough clean with COVID appropriate sanitizer before they go in. And in terms of first aid, I'm trained in first aid, but we've been advised to give no mouth-to-mouth CPR if that is indeed needed. And I've got 2 cats, so I've asked people not to, and there's a wasp that's just come in, there's no petting of my cats. So when people have actually started to book, I send them these 5 documents: how to safely wear and take off a cloth face covering, and how to wash a cloth face covering, which are both from the CDC, and then a hand hygiene poster from the NHS, and then obviously they have the 10-page risk assessment and a 4-page waiver. When they come to my house, they enter through the garden, and there are posters. So the first poster that they come to is wear a face mask, and then they reach the table where there's hand sanitizer and another poster. And you can get quite a lot of these different posters on freesignage.co.uk. When I'm getting ready to set up, I always obviously clean myself and make sure that I'm thoroughly sanitized before I handle the equipment, and I always wear a mask. So I tend to wear a cloth mask when I'm setting the equipment, because I don't want my breath to go onto their props. I've got a table here which greets them. They've got the hand sanitizer in the corner. I have a thermometer, distance thermometer, and all of the waivers which they sign every single time after being asked a number of questions. Excuse me. All of the equipment is stored in separate bags. So I've spent a lot of time making bags, and the bags are named. So I don't do a constant washing of equipment because I'm fortunate enough to have quite a lot of it. The mats, however, are cleaned on an ongoing basis. The hoops are, there's no tape on the hoops, and so they can be cleaned with various products that I'll talk about in a bit. And all the soft rigging, so the strops and whatever carabiners are in contact with the students, they will also be put into a bag. So this is them coming, they come through the gate, they meet at the table, and they have, and I take my temperature and their temperature so that we're all happy with the way things are. So the session. There's no cardiovascular warm-up. I focus on mobilisation, but I have asked people to come already warmed up. But it being the way it is, people quite often come and they've just been to the shop or they've been doing whatever they've been doing, and then they turn up and go, oh no, I haven't done any of that. So I do a mobilisation warm-up with them each, off the equipment, and then working with them on the equipment as well. I do my best to have no physical contact. Each of us is wearing a mask, by the way, so if they can, they're wearing a mask, and I wear one with a clear space so that it's easier for lip reading, and also communication does seem to be a bit better through them. And we just work to the students' ability. If, however, there have been a couple of occasions where I've had to step in, as soon as I've made contact with them, I sanitize my hands again. For the de-rigging, I have a ladder. I was doing everything via a rope, but I was getting exhausted, so I purchased a nice long ladder. They hold the equipment out of the way. I clamber up the ladder. They have their bag. They lower the. I lower it down. They put it into the bag, and then it's put out away from everything else, so that I can deal with it after the whole day's teaching. I use soap and water to wash down the mats, and as you can see, I've got a crash mat, and then I've got a yoga mat that I put on top of that, and then these skinny gym mats that go on top of that to stop it slipping. And I've got quite a few of these little gym mats, so they're the ones that I clean. They're put out of the way to dry, and then I replace them. And so only once they're dried and ready to use again would I reuse them. I use washable cloths as well, and so I have a separate bag I think there's another side. Yeah, so here's a bag, another bag I made for the hoop. So once it's been cleaned, I can then pop it into the bag. And then there's another bag where I put all of the actual cleaning equipment, which can then all be put in the washing machine. So for me, there were plenty of pros and cons. It's great to work at home. I'm only teaching those that I know. So I've already got a basic understanding of what they can and can't do. It's very specific and focused teaching, and also it's very specific learning. So we can negotiate what it is that they want to work on, what they want to develop towards. Some people are just coming for fitness. Other people are wanting to work towards sequences and acts. So I can be very, very specific to them. And obviously I don't have to pay any rent and to negotiate with other venues and their protocols. And certainly at the moment, that's quite a complex issue for me. There are clear cons. I've got many more people coming into my garden, although it's only one-to-one or one-to-household. It's still more people, which puts both me and my partner at greater risk. So I really have to adhere to as many protocols as I can. It's not as accessible as I would like it to be. I'm not accepting newcomers. I've only just started to work with young people again, so I'm now working with secondary school students that I know, but I'm still not making it available to my youth circus because they're just too young, and I don't feel that they'll be able to socially distance and work without me spotting them at the moment. In terms of disability, there are some students who can still come, which is not a problem because we know each other pretty well and we can work without spotting. But for others, again, it's not so accessible. There's less room for improvisation. I'm being more prescriptive with the way that I'm teaching. And then within that prescription, there is room for creativity and improvisation, but much less than I would normally do. It's clearly weather dependent. There's a lot of camaraderie where everyone's sort of working and having fun together. Oh, next one. And then there are the true costs of it. So I've divided this into financial, time and emotion. So obviously there's the PPE. For me, it's not been by any means huge, but there are additional things that I've had to buy, like the cleaning products. I've bought a little bit more aerial kit to make sure that I've got enough to sustain. I've bought 2 ladders, which cost me an arm and a leg. And in terms of my actual earning, I've worked out that I spend 60% of my time on preparation and cleaning, and only 40%, which is the paid teaching bit. So it doesn't really feel like it's particularly financially viable. In terms of time, I've spent hours upon hours upon hours doing research, creating documentation. Student communication is probably about the same anyway. And then I make all of my face coverings and kit bags. From an emotional perspective, certainly in the early stages, it was a real sort of push and pull between, you know, are we all going to be safe from COVID-19? And what about not spotting? I was quite concerned about that because I was quite hands-on. And then there's also the safety for me and my partner. Am I bringing COVID into the space, into our home? Confusion is ongoing because there are constantly changing guidelines, and even across different sectors. You know, you must wear a face mask in a shop, but not in a pub. I'm going to be working in a secondary school and there's no social distancing pretty well going on, but then, you know, you go to a gym and you have to be social distance. So, and then, like I mentioned, in terms of the long term, the way I'm working at the moment just is not financially viable. But I wanted to do this. I wanted to maintain a relationship with my students because I've invested an awful lot of time, effort and money in Airhedz. But I've asked them, a few of them, what they thought of the process so far. And I got this lovely little email from one parent saying that she was just so happy to be back, and then really thanking because she was one of the youth people, one of my youth group, who I'd said, no, okay, now I'm happy to bring you back. This is from another youth participant. She said that she's felt very safe with everything that's in place, but she does think that wearing a face mask is particularly challenging because it makes her hot. Strange not to have physical contact, but it's also improving her independence in the sense of seeing how she can push herself, which I think is really lovely. Because they're doing one-to-ones, they are having much more time on the aerial kit than they would have in the youth group or the youth circus, because it's literally just them for half an hour. So they're exhausted, but they're also really pushing their skills. And she's missing the chat with other people. This is a much older person, happy with the protocols. Wear sunscreen, but again, be careful of what sunscreen you're wearing, because if you've got the really oily ones, it can damage the equipment, but it can also make you slip. And this is my oldest student. He is over 80, and it's been really exciting to see him come back and sort of manage expectations, particularly with him. He was a really good example for me of, you know, one day it will be brilliant, he can do anything and everything, and the next day, actually, no, he's exhausted, he can't do it. So it's trying to manage people's expectations. But I just want to look at the very last point that this person sent, which was, I asked them what advice would they give to others if they were going to either join an outdoor session or if they were going to run one. And they've said, I think at this time, those who aren't bothered about social distancing or with other likewise views about COVID-19 need to keep those personal thoughts out of their business offering, as it muddies the waters for everyone else. Stick to the rules and be consistent and clear about your practice so that everyone else knows where they stand. And I think that is really important from a business perspective, no matter what you think as an individual, whether you believe it's there or whether it's from 5G or whatever, that's irrelevant. You, as a business, you do have a duty of care and legal responsibilities as well as the moral ones. So I do think it's really important that you're just as clear as possible. So the products that I've been using, Circol, I did lots of research into what was out there, and both the Zidac hand gel and the Circol, although it says antibacterial, they both mention COVID-19 on them. So the Zidac is what everybody uses when they come into my space, as do I. The Circol I use on the hoop, but I've now started to use just soap and water, and then if I want to do an additional thing, then I do it with the Circol. And the Dettol is really, if people haven't brought their own chairs with them, I've got some chairs that I can use, and then if I can't soap and water them, then I will spray it with the Dettol and then leave it outside to clear. Finally, there are some resources here. I put hyperlinks on all of them. This is just a sort of smattering. There are so many out there, but these are ones that I accessed. You've got the guidance for personal trainers and coaches, which was specifically useful for, you know, starting to think working outdoors. Safety and aerial arts, Stephen Santos, I don't know if, I think many of you will know him. He's done loads of research into how different products react to aerial equipment, and as well as multiple other things. CircusRigging.info is through Airhedz, and they've got some really good resources on there, COVID specific. And I based my risk assessment and my waiver on theirs and my old risk assessment, so I brought those two things together. This is another post of the Staying COVID-19 Secure in 2020. It's a post that you can just download, and you're supposed to show that in your workspace. So basically, it's just stating that you have fulfilled these criteria. And then obviously you've got the NHS and gov.uk. Clearly, if you're in different places around the world, you'll have different guidance, and even across the UK, we've got, you know, 4 different devolved governing bodies, and so you'll have to find the one that's most appropriate to you. Hopefully that wasn't too garbled, and that's kind of it. So I'm going to stop sharing And over to anyone who has a conversation, has a question, or oh, hello, Steve, you're there. Do you want to unmute yourself if you have a question, or you want to have a chat about something?
First, yeah, thank you. That was great. It's really comprehensive. Have you, or anyone else really, it's the conflicting guidance thing, because I work in a school setting, but I'm technically an out-of-school provider, so it's only children, young people. So I'm kind of looking at the out-of-school provision and a little bit of the school, and there seems to be a thing with the government of saying under 13, potentially if you form a bubble, you can kind of share equipment. Has anyone got any thoughts on that?
I haven't seen that. Certainly, because I'm starting teaching in a secondary school in September, and they are talking about bubbles, but we haven't sort of specified about the use of equipment. And at the moment, all of the circus equipment is out of action in the school. Don't know about other people.
Yeah, so we're starting a summer school next week outdoors with 2 aerial rigs outside and the option to move into studios if the weather's bad. But hopefully we'll keep them outside and as far apart from each other as possible. And we're going with there's no point in the proceedings where more than 3 people will use a single piece of kit. So most of that will be siblings, or households. So yeah, that'll be quite clear. And then we're just going to do 1 day of silks, and then all the silks will be quarantined for a week. 1 day on other equipment which can then be quarantined. So yes, we're bubbling within what we're doing. We're going to have 60 kids here next week, 5 groups of 12. Each group of 12 is kept separate from every other group of 12. Within the groups of 12, there'll be enough kit for them to, where they have to share those bits of kit in very small groups. And we always do as much cleaning between sessions, between use and everything else as we can. So yes, I think that idea of small bubbles is definitely got currency, and compared to what's happening in schools with 15 kids in a classroom, we're infinitely more defensive.
Although even in the schools, they were saying that they weren't allowed to sort of share pens. So it's kind of like you might be in the same space, but you're not allowed to share a pen.
It's bizarre that there's really strict rules on things like pens and stuff, but I think the idea is that where you can have your own equipment, so like for instance juggling equipment, they should absolutely have their own set, but where you can't, it says like PE equipment like balls, and because I've been teaching this term and we had to be absolutely like 1 ball per child and do really crazy PE lessons, but now they're kind of saying yes, you can play a ball game, but you have to only in that bubble, and then you have to sanitize it before, say, a different class uses it. And so on that kind of principle, I was thinking, really reassured to hear Nick sort of interpreted the same way, that perhaps I could have 2 children, the under 13s, sharing 1 silks, and then that gets put away and so on.
Sharing within the same household?
No, in a session. So say if we have like, a group of 6 kids in the class that always come, but we only have 3 sets of silks, then those 2 kids will always share the red silk together. And then if one of them gets it, you're minimizing the contact. But whereas adult classes and gyms are quite clearly saying 1 piece of equipment per person, it has to be cleaned in between, and it's really quite limiting. But it seems like for youth, we've got a slight leeway that perhaps 2 or 3 could potentially share, because it forms a bubble as long as it's consistent. That's yeah.
And if you look at the team sports advice, which is sort of saying don't hand things to other people unless you really have to. Try and keep it separate. Yeah, and I think once you're getting into 2 people using something, you can get into, well, we really have to, because it's the only way of doing it.
I just wonder if it's worth, because obviously with fabrics and with ropes, you've got much more bodily contact than, you know, the whole piece of kit is with you. Whereas on a hoop, you can, if you haven't got the tape on it, you can actually clean that down really easily. Also with the bars, so before I said, I've now got some trapezes, which I've got 1 per person as well, but I was using just a naked bar and using strops, so that those could, so you could still have the bar and then remove the strops, and the strops would be separated for 1 person. I mean, I don't know, I just feel that if there's, if you're playing a ball game, your contact is with your hands. So long as you sanitize your hands, you're playing the game, and then you don't touch your face and you sanitize again, I can really understand why that would be appropriate. But if you're working with fabric or anything like that, where it's coming onto your face or moving around, I would be much more concerned about that and sharing that.
You're
Yeah,
muted. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I think yes, you know, there is. It's about drawing that line about what's practical, what means you can keep doing it, you know, and not completely closing down, and yeah, just making it as safe as possible. And you know, yes, the potential, but it's a very tiny potential, is for, you know, for those 2 young people to transmit from one to the other. But you know, our view has been, if you keep it that narrow, it's a risk worth taking, given the, you know, the relatively low numbers amongst young people.
There's zero social distancing going to happen in schools from September, certainly in the primary age. They'll just be like, they already hugging each other the minute they're outside the gates, and you know, it's just one of those things. So it's about, I think, like you said, about kind of just being really clear about sticking to the rules. And obviously kids play on playgrounds, and that's allowed, and that's really similar kind of contact levels to aerial equipment. So that's kind of where I was going with that interpretation of guidance. But the government seemed to say that children over 13 are more like an adult, starting to get more of an adult risk to COVID. So I was thinking potentially like my teen classes maintaining absolute 1-to-1 with equipment, but then the younger ones potentially, yeah, that's what I'm just considering. So.
And what about you? How are you protecting yourself?
That's still to be decided. I mean, I guess there's potential, I guess, for face masks or visors if, you know, might be advisable. But in school time, we won't be wearing any PPE because the government has just said, you don't. You know, I suppose if someone felt really, really upset about it, they could. But our school we're not doing any.
Mm.
So we've taken this, which is the, I suppose, the common view at the moment, that, you know, talking creates a lot of aerosol. That's probably the most dangerous thing with tutors who are going to have to speak in loud voices, because actually the furthest young person from them is likely to be 10, 12 meters away. That, you know, the tutors ought to be wearing masks, you know, to keep the spray in and not transmit, rather than for protection, because we're, you know, most of what we will do, we're lucky, we've got lots of space, so you know, we're looking at 4-meter distancing where we can, because with 4-meter distance we can, you know, in our big space we can still get 20 people in. So you know, we're fortunate in that, and yeah, so I think the biggest risk is the speaking loudly risk. Yeah.
And a point that Steve made in one of the previous sessions was, you know, obviously the higher people go, the further out you have to be from them, because obviously you've got that risk of droplets falling on you. So you need to, you know, I started when I set the rig up in the garden. I started with it as a really low rig, so that people didn't have the option to go up higher. I mean, just because I knew that they probably wouldn't be able to within the first, you know, having not done any training for 4 months. But also I didn't want them to be pretty gung-ho and just sort of race up and then have lots of problems. And it was only after, you know, it's only a couple of weeks ago that I set it up at a greater height. So sort of actually moderating what's possible within the space, both to support, to protect me and them from not only COVID, because it's also thinking about, well, one of the biggest things was people's expectations, you know, and there's been a lot of a real sense of loss when people come to the sessions, which they feel more able to express because it's just them and me. So they can be frustrated, they can be even angry with themselves, and then it's having that conversation with them. It's like, you know, when I first set the rig up, I really struggled to get up to the top. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, I really did, because I hadn't done it for a month or so, and so you haven't done it for 4 months. So just managing people's expectations, I think, is a really important one. I know, Soren, you've got a mental health session coming up, haven't you?
No, it's about online safety.
Oh no, something that you emailed me.
Oh yes, so so we got funding through the London Community Response Fund, and one of the things we put in for was for mental health first aid training. So we're giving all our tutors mental health first aid training, and because we have a youth group of up to 20 people, we don't know how many of them we can get back, but a lot of them has various issues. So we wanted to be prepared for, and we've also kept in touch with them, and our general manager has called every single one of them just to check in and see how they're doing. So we prepared, and we're jumping in the deep end, because in a couple of weeks we'll have them, 12 of them, in a room for a whole week. So, you know, why not start as big as you can, you know. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. So we're going to be in, it's a very large hall we have. We're going to have 12 of them. We're going to have 4 tutors. Everyone's going to be expected to wear masks. So again, we'll have to see how that goes along with doing exercises in mask and being on equipment in mask. And also see how they fare, as you say, because they're going to come in the room really eager to get back on the equipment, and then suddenly realize they can't lift themselves anymore because they haven't done much in 4 months.
Yeah. In terms of masks and face coverings, a number of things that I've had, well, first of all, I asked everybody to train in them to start off with, just to sort of get used to it. Go to the shop, go for a walk, go for a run, whatever your normal activity or your chosen sport or whatever is, just so that you get used to wearing them, because some people are turning up and they've never actually put one on before, which I think is problematic if you're then going into the air with them for the first time. So I think just getting used to wearing a face covering, and then making sure that it actually fits you. So moving your head around, because the last thing you want to be doing is focusing so much on the face mask that you're then falling off the kit. So we're kind of this constant balance between protection from COVID, but also protecting ourselves aerially, and remembering good discipline in the air.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I'm going to be writing to them in a couple of days, so and giving them the heads up of everything. So that's a really good suggestion, to ask them to wear their mask as much as possible.
You could always set them a funky task and make a little video of you doing, you know, doing handstands or you know, I don't know, doing forward rolls or whatever it is that you can do safely on the wearing a mask and seeing how it moves. I had one, so she was just kind of all a bit like this yesterday, and it was just like, I don't think that's an appropriate use of the mask. Oh, I'm fine. But yeah.
Yeah.
Is anyone else working outdoors at the moment?
Yes, that's a no.
Only me.
Yeah, we start next Monday, so
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
see how it goes. But I mean, let's say we're lucky. We've got a very big grassed area. We've got 2 really big aerial rigs out there, so the distancing is going to be quite significant when we do aerial. And we're only doing, you know, we've been very clear with people that it's a summer camp. It's, you know, in the current circumstances, they're not going to develop their skill level a huge amount over what would have been a more intensive week in normal circumstances. It's more about coming back to enjoy circus, you know, for kids aged 7 to 14, rather than you know, a boot camp of you will be able to do this trick by the end of it.
Yeah. And are your teachers going to be spotting?
No.
No.
No, we've got.
I haven't brought my youth group back yet. I'm wanting to do an event outdoors with the youth circus itself at some point, but I haven't got to that point yet. But I'm very nervous of bringing young children in to do any aerial at the moment, because I just feel that I just know them. I know what they're like. And so there's quite often that you're keeping distance, and you're trying to keep distance so that they're autonomous, they're doing their own thing. But the number of times you just have to race in and save them.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're doing, you know, it'll be mostly low level with very big crash mats underneath them. And where some of the older ones might go higher, then it'll be lunge.
Okay.
But
that's a good idea.
We're lucky because we've got the Mike Wright's huge outdoor rigs that we can use. You know, without those, it would be out of the question. We'd just be sticking. You know, and when we first talked about the summer camp, there was no suggestion we would do aerial. It was going to be juggling, Diablo, blah blah blah. But as time's gone on and we've thought about it more, and you know, listened to these conversations, we've gone, actually, with those big rigs outside, we can do some, which will just add to the mix in those weeks where, you know, we've got 60 kids coming for 6 hours a day for 5 days. You know, some of them are going to get bored with juggling at some point.
Really?
Easy, socially distanced thing to do.
Yeah. And I mean, also the advantage of there's pros and cons. I mean, I live by the sea, and it can get really windy here. And so obviously working fabrics outdoors can be challenging. So that's kind of, but again, it's just learning something new for them, which is great. But also wind can shift the breath and all that side of thing. Then the advantage on a nice day like it has been today, you know, you've got the UV rays which are burning it up as well. So you've got certainly from the various medical conversations and research that I've read up till now, it's saying that UV is a good thing in terms of getting rid of the COVID. Not great for your circus equipment, but at least those sides of things are beneficial.
Yes, if you add all those things together, then your garden's pretty safe.
Yeah. I'm doing my best. It's just the cats that get in the way.
Yeah.
When they're attacking people when they're on the aerial equipment. Like, get the cat out.
So they climb the slopes.
I've got a wonderful video of one of them on my aerial yoga thing. She jumps up and she just wiggles her bottom and she swings around with it. So yeah, they're very good aerial cats.
Just a note to be very careful with your aerial fabrics outside. UV rays will degrade your aerial fabrics very, very quickly. For some aerial fabrics, it can be as little as 6 hours in the sun will make them lose more than half their strength.
Yeah, mine are up for about half an hour at the most. But yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you. Any other points, or shall we call it a day?
I suppose it was just on the no spotting thing, because I mean, like you, I know most of my kids, but I've also got a huge waiting list of who are like, oh yeah, you're restarting, and I've been like, this is where it's going to get really awkward. And I'm certainly looking at doing low aerial hoop, low aerial hammocks for any of those beginners, but even so, I don't know. Yeah. How that would
Mel Stevens was talking about it last week, and she was talking about using woggles, things you have in swimming pools. You know, she'd thought about using sticks, but that was that was a bit too intimidating.
Victorian.
There's woggles you use in the swimming pool.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
they're a bit bendy, but at least you can prod someone with them with
Ah.
a non-threatening way.
Yeah. I have actually contemplated using, I've got these very long hefty broom handles. Well, they're not really broom handles, but these really long sticks that I used to do some work with. And I was thinking, actually, you could just, it's a kind of standing there with a master's rod, but then you could potentially use it as a weight to go. But to be honest, if people are like going into front balances and stuff and over rotating, I'll go to the foot end. So I won't spot the head, I'll spot the foot, and then, you know, clean, but, you know, the foot isn't breathing. So, but I haven't gotten to a point where I'm teaching new people, and at the moment I've just been really nervous, and maybe I've been much more nervous than other people, which is why I ended up going for a full-time job, because I just thought I don't want to push myself into doing things which I'm not comfortable with just to earn a living. I felt I'd rather take a step back, hope I've still got a business that I can, you know, almost quarantine itself, you know, sort of do one session a week, or one session or 2 sessions a week, just to sort of test the waters and see what happens. We don't know how this is going to behave in the winter, when there's a flu epidemic as well that usually hits the country. So I think I'm being quite tentative in terms of how I work outdoors and how I work indoors, and also because I don't have my own studio. I mean, Nick, it's great that you've got your own space. You can set your own protocols. You can make sure that they are across the board, that everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and you have control over that. Whereas I work in 2 other studios. One of them's a school. And they say that they're going to up their cleaning regime, and it's like for the last 20 years that I've been there, I don't think they've ever had a cleaning regime, so I don't know what it would be. And in the other studio where I teach aerial yoga, which is really low, and she is on it, absolutely superbly on it, but it's a really low space and there's no air, so I'm really concerned about the aerosol transmission. So I don't have a viable business, but I'm really hopeful that everybody's going to be able to sort of find their own way, and that we can keep in touch and sort of see what's going on in the States, what's happening in Australia, what's happening in Canada, you know, what you guys are doing in Bristol and London, and Frome.
Yeah, and I think we're all in the same boat, aren't we? We're just trying to find our way through this as safely as we can, without the whole sector just grinding to an absolute stop.
Yeah. We've got to go and see circus shows. Some of them are up and running now. So, you know, send links out to your youth circuses and to your circus groups, and actually tell them that there are shows going on. Wear a mask and bring your own popcorn. But pay more for your ticket. Cool. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for coming. I hope there was something useful. Maybe we'll go and have a little jump around and see if there's something else happening, unless people, or just stay and chat. I'll stay here, but you know.
Whichever way around, I will stop recording now.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Tina.